But I think there's also something else to consider in terms of the inflationary impact in Asia, and that comes from the demand side. Now, we talked about this in more detail in another video, so you can go and look at a more detailed explanation there. But to put it simply, when we think about economies, there's different ways of measuring economic growth. So one is to think about output. So that's gross domestic product. How much output an economy is able to produce. And so as export volumes in semiconductors go up, that's something that increases output in the economy, so GDP rises. And we're seeing that a bit, right? Like, so in Korea, real GDP in the first quarter of this year was up 3.5% year on year. Sort of impressive relative to recent years, not very impressive in sort of an absolute sense. But what also is happening because of the increase in semiconductor prices is that there's a big positive terms of trade shock for the region, right? Like, because energy prices are rising, you would think there's a negative terms of trade shock, that import prices rise more. But because of exports of semiconductor, the prices there are rising so quickly as well. Actually, what Asia is seeing is a positive terms of trade shock. And how that's reflected in incomes is, the economists think about this terms of trade effect, that the terms of trade is the difference between export and import prices, and it's how much purchasing power the products of a particular economy has relative to the rest of the world. And so how that feeds into the national account statistics is a measure called, how that feeds into the national account statistics is a measure called gross domestic income. And if we think about Korea again, gross domestic income is now rising by 12.5% year on year. In per capita terms, it's the strongest growth that's been seen in Korea since the 1980s. This is precisely because of what's happening with semiconductors. So I think on the basis of that, it's reasonable to think that in addition to cost push to inflation that's seeing as the input cost of semiconductors goes up, it's also reasonable to thinking that these economies are going to be seeing demand pull inflation, because actually this is a tailwind to consumption. And so as much as people worry about the K-shaped economy and so on, and that domestic economy is much weaker than the export sector, and that's all fine, it's reasonable, it's true, nonetheless, there's still going to be a tailwind for consumption that wouldn't have been seen otherwise because of what's happened with this huge increase in semiconductor prices.